Hey guys, and welcome to another HitFilm tutorial. This week, community giant Mike Miller is back to show you how to create your own Defender-style title sequence. Let's go.
The opening titles of Marvel and Netflix's The Defenders is a pretty stylish piece of work. It's also fairly easy to get a decent recreation in HitFilm. Taking a close look at the images in the title sequence, most of them are simple silhouettes or high-contrast photographs of the principal actors, being applied over a series of maps of New York City and some particle effects. To recreate this title sequence in HitFilm, first thing you'll need to do is acquire images of maps and photographs of your principals. It would be helpful to plan ahead and take photographs of your actor either on a green or blue screen background with some high-contrast lighting. I didn't do that. I'm Mike Miller from Triem Visual, and today we're going to look at recreating the Defenders titles in HitFilm. Here we are in HitFilm Express 2017. We're going to create a new project. We'll just go ahead and use the 1080p 25 frame per second preset and click on Start Compositing. The next thing we need to do is import our photographs. Next, I'm going to move down to the lower left-hand corner, click the Properties cog for the composite shot, rename this to Animation Mic, and I'm going to go ahead and change the duration to 5 seconds. Now, we'll come down to our photo of our person in our media bin, right-click, and select Make Composite Shot. Change the duration to 5 seconds. This photo was not shot on a plain colored background or chroma key, so to isolate it from the background, we're going to have to manually use the masking tools. You can see as I draw the mask, I'm not necessarily trying to be 100% precise. For example, I cut the left edge of the mask inside my own hair. Because of the processing we're going to do, I don't necessarily need to capture every last detail. Now that I've got myself masked out, let's process this photo so that it will be suitable for use as a matte source. We'll come into the Effects panel and type in Curves and drag the color curves to the layer. Grab the Threshold effect and drop that below the curves. I'm going to try to adjust the slider to get a good balance of light and shadow in the photo. By adding the Curves effect above the threshold, I can open up the curves and further adjust the balance of lights and darks. You can see by adjusting the curves, I've even been able to lower what would normally be the white parts of the image to a darker gray. This allows me to bring some of the areas that were originally in highlight into shadow. I'm mostly concerned with the highlight areas of my face. I want the skin of my face to be well defined, but I also want to keep the shadow areas around the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. Getting the contrast correct on the face of your subject is the most important part of getting this look to work. We'll add a grade layer on top, come up to the effects list, and grab the blur effect. Drop the blur on, and set the blur radius to 2 pixels. This just softens up the edge a bit. This basic technique of dropping an image into a layer and then using curves and threshold to reduce it to a black and white map is something that will need to be done to every single image in the composition. Return to the media panel and duplicate the first composite shot with your subject by hitting Ctrl-D. I'll go ahead and rename this first one to Winter Mikey Invert. This is the composite shot that's already open. Create a new black plane, drop it underneath the image, return to the grade layer, and add the invert effect. We'll be using this later on once we get into the compositing stage. Now we'll be doing the same procedure to all of our individual map photos. Right-clicking on the image in the media bin, converting to a composite shot 5 seconds long, adding curves and threshold, adjusting to taste, then adding a grade layer and an invert filter. We're looking for white lines on a black background. We'll change the sorting in the media bin from by folder to media, and from by name to by type. This groups all of my composite shots together in a single folder. I don't need to see the original images anymore. From this point, I'm only going to be working with the treated composite shots. Also close out the tabs for all the other composite shots on the timeline, except for my original Animation Mic composite. Let's drag in the Winter Mikey and Winter Mikey Invert composites from the media bin into the Animation Mic comp. We're going to want to parent one of these images to the other. The order doesn't really matter, we just want them to stay together. I'll parent Winter Mikey Invert to Winter Mikey. And then we'll change both of these layers to a 3D compositing mode. Open up the transform properties for the parent, rescale both the layers, and then move them where we want them to be in the frame. I'm also going to push them back in 3D space a bit on the Z-axis. Next, we'll drag in all of our map comps. Then I'll toggle each map comp off and on while I decide which one I want to use as my background layer. Once I've decided which map I'm going to use as my background layer, I'll move it to the bottom of the stack of maps and rename it Background Layer. I'll change my background map to a 3D compositing mode and push that pretty far back in Z-space, and then scale it back up to fill the screen. I'll then rotate and reposition the background map until I like how it looks. Now I'll use the middle mouse button to zoom out of the viewer panel and select the rectangular mask tool. We'll draw a rectangular mask over the left edge of the map. Then twirl down the mask properties and increase the feather. Continue twirling open the mask controls until you find the control for path. Enable keyframing, and we'll move the playhead about 4 seconds into the animation. Grab the corners of this mask and drag it out to fill the entire screen. We'll want to add some color at this point, so come up to the Effects tab, search for the color gradient, and drag that onto the layer. We'll change the start and end color of the gradient to 2 slightly different shades of red. Change the blend mode of the gradient to multiply and turn the opacity up all the way to 100%. We'll use the middle mouse button to zoom out so we can see the entire boundary of our image, shown here by the blue box. The 2 crosses we can see are the start and end points of the gradient. I'm going to reposition these in the frame, then activate keyframing for the start and end points. Move to the final frame of the animation and move these points somewhere else. This will just give a little bit of motion to the background colors as they draw in. Now we'll create another black plane and name it Outline. Go up to the Effects panel, type in Set Matte, grab the Set Matte effect, and drag it onto this black plane. The Set Matte effect sets the transparency for a layer using another layer as the control. We'll set the source layer to the Winter Mikey layer, change the matte source to alpha, and change the blend to replace. This chokes the black plane so that it will only show where it intersects the outline of myself. Let's start taking a look at the other map layers and decide which one we want to use to fill in my face. Once I decide on a layer, I'm going to name that Face Fill, convert it to 3D, push it back into space, and position it where I want it. Grab the Set Matte effect, drop that on the Face Fill layer, choose Winter Mikey as the source layer, but this time I'm going to set the matte source to luminance and change the blend to replace. This will limit the map to only the highlighted or white areas of the Winter Mikey composite shot photo. I'll add and animate a mask to this layer as well, only this time I'll use an elliptical mask instead of a rectangular mask. Just like with the background layer, I'm going to animate this mask to open up over about half of the length of this shot. Now we'll copy and paste the gradient effect from the background map layer into the face fill layer. We'll zoom out and grab the start and end position points for the gradient and move them to new locations. Skip to the end of the shot and move the start and end points somewhere else again. Next, I'm going to repeat the same series of steps using another one of my map composites as the fill. However, when I toggle it on, I can see that the topmost map is covering up all the animations below. This is the point at which I'm going to take all of my map layers and change the blending mode of each one to add, repeating the same series of steps with my other map layers. Convert to 3D, push back in 3D space, add the set matte effect, select Winter Mikey as the source layer, experiment with blend modes, and then, once I'm happy with the placement, adding and animating a mask to kind of wipe the map in. For one of these layers, I drew an irregular mask with the freehand mask tool and animated the expansion property instead. Again, I copied and pasted the same gradient effect that I've been using and adjusted the start and end points. At this point, I went back over my layers and just changed and refined a few things. I adjusted some of the mask animations, and I dropped the opacity of the background map layer from 100 to something around 40 or 50, because the background map was overpowering. And finally, I have a still frame that has the look that I want. Next, we'll move the playhead to about 4 seconds into the animation. Open up the camera controls and activate the position property. I'll move the playhead back about a second and then move the camera to a new position. I'll move the camera back in Z space, over to the left, and up a little bit, so that the camera starts closer into the layers with my face centered more in the frame. Then I'll take this first camera keyframe, move it to the first frame of the composite shot, select both the keyframes, and change the interpolation type from linear to smooth. It's time to grade. We'll create a grade layer, name it Tint, and put the tint effect on it. We'll change the colors in the tint effect so that white is being mapped to a slightly orangish red. And we'll change the tint amount to about 75%. This will clean up those last lingering bits of gray where the set matte and the masks are interacting. I'll create another grade layer and name it Glitch Glow. On the Glitch Glow layer, I'm going to add a zoom blur effect. Then I'll take the blur strength up to 100% and activate keyframing. I'll move forward a few frames, change the strength from 100 to -100, step forward another few frames, take the strength back up to 100, step forward a few more frames, and change the strength to 0. Then set the blend mode of this layer to Add. I'll create another grade layer and call it Glow and add the glow effect. I'll turn the glow intensity up all the way to 5, then I'll play with the threshold and radius sliders until I get the glow positioned where I want it. Then I'll turn the intensity back down to something lower, like about 1.4. I'll duplicate this glow, and on the top glow, I'll bring the radius back into something a lot narrower, like maybe about 5, and turn the intensity of the glow down to about 0.5. I'll create another grade layer and name this Shake, and drag the camera shake effect to the Shake grade layer. I'll turn the shake speed down from 1.5 to about 0.12. I'll change the seed to a random value, and I'll turn the smoothness up a bit. I'll turn the amount down to something lower as well, maybe 5 to 15. Next, we'll create yet another grade layer and call it Letterbox. Drag the Letterbox effect to the Letterbox grade layer. After dragging the Letterbox grade onto the Letterbox grade layer, I didn't like how my face was positioned in the frame, so I went back and adjusted my camera keyframes so that the camera was higher on the y-axis. To create something similar to the floating particles in HitFilm Express, I dragged in my black plane from the media bin. I added the Fractal Noise effect, and I selected the Starfield preset. Users of versions of HitFilm earlier than 2017 will not have this Starfield preset. You'll have to adjust the Fractal Noise yourself. With the Starfield preset, I changed the colors from black and white to black and an orange. I set the blend mode for this layer to add. I made several duplicates of the Fractal Noise layer and spread them out in Z-space and changed the seed on each layer. Then keyframe their position properties so each of them were moving up on the Y-axis a little bit over the course of the animation. And that pretty much covers how to make Defender-style titles in HitFilm Express. The version on screen now was taken into HitFilm Pro for a little bit more work. Anamorphic light flares were added, an effect that's available to Express users if you purchase the atmospheric lighting add-on, but the 3 layers of Fractal Noise were replaced with a full particle simulator. I'd like to thank everybody for sitting through this tutorial. I hope you found it useful, and that you can adapt these techniques to create your own Defender-style titles. I'm Mike Miller for Triem Visual, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Mike, for that awesome tutorial. Everyone else, do remember to subscribe and click the little bell to make sure you're notified of all of the cool content that we've got coming out over the next couple of weeks. Hint, it's going to be amazing. Bye!